Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Galit Speaks podcast. I'm super excited for today's episode. We have a special guest, Michelle Steiner, here. She is a disability writer, photographer, and advocate. She has had articles published on The Mighty, Imagine the World as One, Word Gathering, Dyscalculia Blog, and her own blog, which is called Michelle's Mission. She works as a teacher's aide in a school and lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and 2 cats. Please welcome Michelle.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So excited for you to be here. So this is a topic that I have not covered, and so I'm super excited to get into it and to talk to you. So the things that we were going to talk about today are learning disabilities, hidden disabilities, and neurodiversity. So what got you interested in these topics? What's your connection?
Well, what got me interested in talking about learning disabilities is I was diagnosed with a learning disability as a child. I can remember being in kindergarten and struggling with math and things like that. And it just really was a real difficulty for me. And one thing I was really good at, though, was reading and writing. I always loved to do that. And I can remember my writers group, I had a friend that told me, you really should write about all your experiences. And I was really hesitant about that because I thought, well, I kind of just want to pretend they don't exist and just kind of have that fade into the background. But once I started writing about it, it just was the most freeing thing. And I really found a lot of other people that had disabilities as well.
Yeah. So I heard you mention that you just wanted to pretend that they didn't exist. I think that's a feeling that a lot of people with disabilities have. And how did you overcome that?
Well, one of the things that really helped me was by sharing my story and accepting that. And a lot of it's just being comfortable with yourself. I thought the only way I could be successful was, I don't have a disability anymore. And it was embracing the disability. And it was finding those things that I was good at that really helped a whole lot with accepting things and advocating for myself.
That's beautiful. And if you, I don't want to be I don't want to be forward, but what is your disability so that
Sure.
our viewers can identify with it?
Right. I have dyscalculia, which is a math-based learning disability. When I was first diagnosed as a child, we didn't call it, we didn't really give it a specific name. It just, we knew I wasn't going to be able to understand math. That was pretty much from a young age, we knew that. I was always great at reading. And another thing I struggled with was my eye-hand coordination. And I wasn't diagnosed until an adult with having hand dexterity issues. But looking back in my childhood, I struggled with writing my name. I really struggled with things like that. So it was really difficult to remember, not remember, but it was difficult for me to be able to do that. And I would have objects fall out of my hands, and we just didn't know. I mean, we just thought, it's the learning disability, or you're clumsy. But when I got diagnosed with that, that made a lot of sense. And I also have visual perception issues. And my visual perception issues aren't with my eyes, my eyesight, they're with my brain. So I'm not able to drive. And so those things can be somewhat of a struggle for me.
Yeah. And when you were growing up, so a lot of disabilities it's not as it is today where there are more diagnoses of disabilities. What led to you being diagnosed, and how was that process for you? Because I'm sure it was not an easy process.
Oh, definitely. My preschool teacher thought something was going on even before I went into kindergarten. but I was my parents' first child, so they didn't have a whole lot to base it on, and they didn't have specialized preschool or a lot of those early diagnostic tools that they do now. So my parents, they sent me off to kindergarten, and my teacher really started to notice that I wasn't able to do things like count, or I struggled with tying my shoes. And being that I was an only child, I also struggled socially. And there was just a lot of stuff that I just wasn't progressing that what a normal kindergartner would be doing at that age. So, but the school came in and they arranged testing and found out that I had a disability.
Okay.
And that was difficult because as a young child, I wanted to be able to go to school and learn just like everybody else. I didn't want to struggle. I wanted to make my parents happy, which they've always been very proud of me, and they've been my greatest support. But that was a really difficult process to hear that as a young child.
Yeah, I know that a lot of children with disabilities, they get picked on or feel like they are not normal, not part of the group. Was that something that you faced as well?
Oh, yes, definitely. I did get picked on. Part of it was I went to a very small Western Pennsylvania school district. If you weren't like them, you didn't fit in. And I can remember everybody knew that I went to learning support. Because I did have classes with my regular peers eventually, but they knew that I was going there and getting the test read, or a lot of them didn't understand what exactly was going on. I remember some of them thought I was getting an easier advantage, and I was getting the answers, and that wasn't the case. They were reading the test to me. And some thought, well, you're doing really easy work. Well, for someone who doesn't have a disability, it would be easy. But for me, it was a real struggle to be able to do that. So that was difficult. And I had difficulty relating to my learning support peers because a lot of them, they struggle more with reading and they didn't struggle with math. So that was really a tough thing for me to be able to relate and just find where I fit in. And that got even more difficult as I got older. The peer groups are more defined, and I just didn't feel like I fit in a lot.
So I have two questions. First is, how do you feel now with, fitting in or being happy with not fitting in? And the second question is, what kind of advice do you have for children or parents of children struggling with disabilities, or even parents of children that are not struggling with disabilities, but how do we teach them to be more inclusive and not to bully those with disabilities?
Right. Well, I can say what really helped me be able to be more social is I started hanging out with students that were in a nearby school that I didn't go to school there. And it was an art program, so people are always a little bit different. And I started to realize, oh, okay, these people do like me. I didn't have a lot of that reputation. And that led to a lot of friends that I still have in the community, different people, but we're still friends after 20 some years. And it was putting myself out there and getting to know other people. So that was a real, that's happened. And I think I used to worry more about what people thought about me. I can remember when I went to college, I didn't get a lot of the accommodations originally because I didn't want to be different. There was still that stigma that was there. And it wasn't until I was like, okay, this is what I need to do to make it. I need to have a note taker. I need to have the extended test time, and I need to advocate for myself and not worry what my classmates would think about that, or even at times my professors. And so my advice to parents is definitely not to give up on their child. My parents were always my greatest supporters, and they didn't give up on me. And they explained things to me as a young child that I had a learning disability and that I learned differently. And I think that's important. And I also think it's important for the person that has a disability to find what works for them and to be comfortable with advocating for themselves.
Yeah. So that's something that's super hard to do with or without a disability. Definitely advocating for yourself is something that I've struggled with, not on the learning disability side, but I have some health issues. And
Right.
so I have had to advocate for myself with every single doctor that I've come in contact with. And I know that sometimes it's really hard to do that and you get discouraged. What kept you going?
A lot of what kept me going was figuring out what I wanted to do and having the support from friends and family. I think that was a big thing too. And God has been a real big influence in my life with faith. There's just been so much that I couldn't do on my own. And it just, believing in that has helped me in getting a better plan than I could originally imagine. That's helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that you hit it right on the head. Like, it's your support system. And if you've got like a good support system going, then you feel like you can keep going. And if you don't have that, it's just so crushing. And so I think it's really important for, if you have a disability, a learning disability, if your child has a disability or a learning disability, to start that support system for them, to be that support system for them, because it makes a huge difference on whether they will
Right.
become successful, happy individuals.
True. Yeah, definitely.
So another thing that I want to talk about is hidden disabilities. So what kind of disabilities are those, and can you explain a little bit about them?
Sure. Hidden disabilities are the ones you can't see. People can't see that I have a learning disability. So I'll get a lot of times people will say, I'll tell someone, oh, I have a disability. That's why I'm not able to drive or I'm not able to do math well. And they'll say, well, you don't look like you're disabled. And I have to say, well, some people have disabilities that you can't see. And other examples of that can be ADHD. People can't, they can see that the person's having difficulty paying attention, but a lot of times somebody will see a child that has that at the grocery store or in public, and they automatically blame the parents for the kid running around. And yes, there are consequences, but there are a reason behind that that you may not be able to see. People with chronic pain, a lot of them have disabilities, and the people can't see that they're in pain, and that's why they're not able to maybe get around or maybe not be able to make it out. So people can't see that. Things like Tourette's. I mean, you can't see that somebody has that. There's a lot of ones that I think a lot of times people see a disability and they think of somebody that's in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
or they think of somebody that you can see the facial features for Down syndrome. That's a big one that we can see, but and they have disabilities as well. But when someone has a hidden disability, it can sometimes be difficult for people to be able to acknowledge that they have a disability. And just because you can't see it, the disability doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. And I think that maybe a good rule of thumb is, and we should anyway be trying to do this, but give everyone the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. That is so true, because
Yeah,
we don't know.
I
Yeah.
think we jump to conclusions so quickly and we judge people so quickly, and you don't know what's going on with them that day, that year, or even if they have something long term that they're dealing with. I know a big one that you mentioned is, chronic pain or other things like that. So I definitely have encountered that, and my husband has that, and it's something that he has dealt with his whole life. Of people just think he looks normal, like, he looks normal. He looks like there's nothing wrong with him, so there must be nothing wrong. But there are underlying issues that hurt him every day.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a good rule of thumb is to just give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and also to believe people when they say something.
Exactly, because I'll have people that'll even have arguments that I've known them for years, and God bless them, they'll say, "Well, you can't have a math disability. You have a bachelor's degree." I'm like, "Well, I found a program that interested me, and that didn't require a lot of math, and I was able to use accommodations to in advocacy to handle that requirement, and it was difficult, but." Yeah, you can still have a degree and still struggle with something. Or people will say, "Well, you're a published writer. It should be easy doing stuff like spell check," and it is. But I still have, like, my husband; he's my favorite editor, so he'll edit stuff for me, and people will just think a lot of that, just things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sometimes you just have to take people at their word and not try to prove them wrong.
Right. Or you have to think, what do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish today? I don't have ADHD myself, but I was in the grocery store a couple months ago, and I had a clerk that was overwhelmed, and it was busy in the store, and she said, "Hold on, I'm having an ADD moment." Now, I don't know if that cashier truly did have attention deficit disorder. I try not to judge, but I I wanted to, tell that person, you saying that isn't exactly very nice to other people. But I thought, do I want to buy my groceries and leave, or do I want to be causing a scene in the store? And sometimes you just, it's picking, your battles at that point.
Yeah. And I definitely, it's funny because I have ADHD, and I haven't, it's crazy to think about, but I never really, because it didn't affect me in school until much later in life, until I got to college. I never really took it as a disability, and still to this day, like, I don't really consider myself as having a disability. So to hear you say that, like, oh yeah, there is a reason, it's almost a little bit of giving myself permission to not be 100% all the time, because I'm also a perfectionist, and I also, run my own business and, like, do a million things, and I like to think of myself as super capable and just on top of everything all the time. But to acknowledge that, yeah, there is something there, and I have to give myself a little bit of leeway for it, and I have to, like, almost forgive myself sometimes for not being able to focus.
Right, and sometimes it's not, from what I know, it's not being able to focus, it's trying to focus on one thing, because your brain is constantly on, and it's hard to have that the filter on that. But and that's, definitely, to have that grace for yourself. That's been something I had to do, not apologize for having a disability, but to give myself that grace that it's okay to struggle and everything, because everybody has something they might need a little extra help in, or just something that's difficult for them. And to have that grace, and to find that it was more, for me, it was more empowering to focus on the things I can do rather on the things that I can't do.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's really important to remember, because most of the time we do the opposite, right? We focus on
Mhm.
all of the things that we didn't accomplish, all of the things that we can't accomplish, all of the things we can't do. For me, the fact that I can't fall asleep because my mind is racing,
Right.
or that I can't focus on this one thing because I'm doing 100 other things at the same
Mhm.
time. And yeah, if you would see my computer that I'm talking to you on right now, I have 4 screens and
Oh my
probably
goodness.
20 tabs open on each screen.
Oh my gosh.
So like I am, yeah,
That's a lot.
sometimes it's a
Yeah.
lot, and sometimes I feel like totally on top of it, and other times I just have to give myself a little bit of grace and like allow myself to have a moment
Mhm.
and figure out what needs to be prioritized and like force myself to focus. Um, it's been especially difficult because I stopped taking my medication about a
Mhm.
year ago, almost a year ago
Okay.
now, because fortunately, I'm trying to get pregnant, but
Oh,
unfortunately, ADHD medication, Adderall, you cannot be on while pregnant. And
right.
so
Right.
I had to start weaning myself off of it,
Mhm.
almost a year ago to kind of
Right.
make sure that. So I'm on now. I go to a naturopath who gave me kind of like a natural version of ADHD medication
Oh,
called,
great.
it's like vitamin supplements called Cognitive Formula. And that helps a
Oh,
lot, but it's definitely not the same as, being on Adderall for,
right. So, yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. So that
like,
can be tough. I mean, when you're not able to do what you need to do, to be able to help. I hear you on that.
yeah. So, so giving myself grace and allowing
Mhm.
uh,
Right.
allowing me to forgive me is is something that I need to remember.
Yep.
Mm.
Exactly. And that's so important because a lot of times other people aren't always giving that grace. So you got to give that to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can still I remember part of what was difficult for me to accept a disability was I had I had a teacher that told me, well, you can't do college because of your math disability. So that kind of gave me a bad attitude for a while. And um, I had a psychiatrist that told me, well, you're probably not going to go beyond community college. And I was told I was going to have limited job choices. And for a while, I was beating myself up too for a lot of that. And it's like you said, when you give yourself that grace, it was just so freeing for me.
And how did you overcome that when they told you, because that's somebody in authority, right, telling you that
Yeah.
you're never going to be able to do something?
Right.
How were you able to overcome that and push forward and get your bachelor's and have a
Mhm.
successful career?
Right. Well, I think the first thing that helped was when I had the teacher that told me I couldn't do it. I also had a student teacher that told me, well, you can do college. And she showed me she told me about people that had disabilities that were there. And that was, freeing because I didn't have any disability representation. And I think it was having that strong support system, having the family, the friends, and just be like, well, if that doesn't work out, then try this again. And it was using the accommodations that helped too. And I can still remember when I got my associate's degree, I was happy. I graduated, but I always wanted more for myself.
Mm.
And I was able to move out on my own and enjoying life. But then financially, I had to move back in with my parents. And I thought at that point, let's just try to give the university a try. And the job that I was at downsized, and I got accepted in the school. And that turned out to be a blessing for me because I was able to focus in on school was pretty much my job. I was a full-time student and wasn't working like I was doing at community college, but that put a lot of pressure on me. And I just advocated for myself, and I found the right programs, and I became more comfortable in doing that. And that was really helpful for me. And I was able to get the bachelor's degree, and it was tough, but my second time around was so much easier. And I think maturity had a lot to do with that too. Being an adult, you kind of knew what to expect. You kind of knew it wasn't the end of the world if you went into a class and you didn't do well on a test, or you didn't do well on a project. You understood that people made mistakes, and it was just going forward, fixing that, and moving on.
Yeah. And let me ask you, because you've spoken about a different accommodations that you were given. How do people find out about those? How did you find out about those? Because I think that a lot of people with disabilities, they just don't know what's available to them.
Right. Well, when I was in high school, I had a rep come from Office of Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and it's from the Vocational Rehabilitation Act. They do provide accommodations, testing, everything's for free, and they try to go. They'll go into schools, and what they'll do is they'll try to talk to students about the services that they can provide. So that was my gateway in. I had someone that came in from that agency and told me that this stuff was out there. But when I got to school, I had to do the careful research of saying, well, does this place have disability accommodations or not? And most of them do, because I went to public ones, not private, which some are coming around with having them, because OVR would only does provide for certain places for vendors. So I would go out and see what services they offered, and you would make an appointment, and you'd bring the documentation that said you had a disability. I had to get retested. Now a student that's in high school can go and they can have the IEP even, and it can just show this person has a disability, but the school shows what services they offer. And every place is going to offer something different. And some do require, especially if you go to a private college or training program, that you have to pay for it. But I was really lucky. I went to public ones, so everything that I got on campus, with like extended test time, note taker, tutoring, all that was free.
Okay. So
Right.
what, if someone is going through it now, what type of research do you recommend them going? Like, what should they be Googling?
Sure. Right. What they should be Googling is, you go onto a school that you're interested in, and Googling, when you're on their website, disability services, office for students with disabilities, accommodations. Those are the words you want to be looking up. And that's going to be the key thing to do. And it's also, when you go on tours, if you want to if you're going to go visit a school and you have a disability, make sure that you stop into their office and make an appointment, or just ask people on campus, advisors, or just anybody that you talk to, like when you go in, explaining you have a disability and asking what services are available on campus.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. The other topic that I wanted to talk about is neurodiversity. Can you explain a little bit about that for our audience?
Neurodiversity is people have a person that's neurodiverse has a brain that's wired differently. So when you think of a person that's neurotypical, they will go and they have a brain that the world is more geared towards. It's geared towards people that are able to go out and process and think information in a typical way. But for someone that has a neurodiversity, they have a brain that just simply experiences and might think and needs different accommodations to be able to be able to live. A good example of neurodiversity for me is when you get a person that's neurotypical and they're in a classroom and the teacher asks a question, a neurotypical person is going to be processing an answer. But someone who's neurodiverse, they're going to not be processing the answer first. They have to process the question that's being asked and then the answer. So it's that sometimes it's that extra amount of time that they might have. Some people have, sensory issues, especially we see this with people with autism. They might, certain smells or certain things that they see, like with lighting, that can, really upset them. And there's certain things that are calming. And that's something that somebody may not think about that's neurotypical. And everybody experiences it differently.
Yeah. So how do you think is best for neurotypicals to give that leeway to people that aren't?
I think the main thing is to be accepting, because sometimes we think, oh, we're making life a lot easier. People are lazy or people are unmotivated. And that's not necessarily a true situation that has. And it's to ask the person, well, how do you learn best? What are things that you can do to help you? I think that's, and just having that understanding that there are people that think and learn differently.
Yeah. While you were talking about this, what was coming to mind was a show that I've seen. Have you seen Love on the Spectrum?
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it.
So I actually think that shows like that can help neurotypicals understand a little bit more how autism works, how neurodiversity works. I know that after watching that, I started to understand it a lot more, because you can see them learning, right? You can see them and how they're trying to understand the world and how the world needs to be explained to them, because they just don't process it in the same way, like social interactions.
Right, exactly. They don't. I know a lot of people that are on the spectrum or have other neurodiversities, and it's hard for them to form relationships, and especially romantic ones. I can remember there was a person that I knew, and she was floored that I found somebody with a disability. And she's like, oh, I never found anybody, or how do you do that? And it's those soft skills of like how you interact with people, and that's difficult. So I think it's important that people do have shows like that where they're able to see Love on the Spectrum or things like that, those are definitely things that someone might struggle with, and that definitely there is hope for someone that has a disability to find somebody.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to also see it in order to just humanize it, right? Because sometimes you think that, oh, maybe they don't want love or they're not looking for it, but you can really see that no, they are the same as us, and they want to be loved and to feel love, and they crave that social interaction, even though they can't have it in the same way that we do, or that somebody else does.
Right. They want to have that, and they look at that. Yeah, they want to have the same thing. We may not experience it the same way, but yes, definitely relationships are so important that people do have. And that is something that, everybody wants to have, that longs for that relationship. And just sometimes things are misunderstood too with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's great to see it, being depicted in on television, and to have people have someone to identify with, like, oh, I'm not alone.
Right. Exactly. Because sometimes you do feel like you are alone. But when you're able to see other people that have the same struggles, it can be really comforting.
Yeah. And do you feel like, so I know that you have a blog, right? Do you feel
Mhm.
like that's what your blog does for others? Or are most of your viewers with disabilities or neurodiverse? Or do you have a lot of people that are neurotypical and just looking to understand?
Right. I get both. And that is kind of what my blog does. Sometimes I will hear from people that have disabilities and they say, wow, I can really relate to what you wrote about. Because I'll try to put a lot of things into metaphors that just relate to my life with having a disability. And I'll also get people that maybe work with others with disabilities and are neurotypical. And I'll, I have parents that might have children with that as well, and they get that understanding of what it's like for me to have a disability, or I'm one person to have that. But I try to you know encourage people that have disabilities to be their best and to look for different ways to do things. I also try to empower people with disabilities that they have gifts and talents as well. And I really try to educate people on what it is to have a learning disability.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that, like you said, they have talents and they have skills that they should and can be sharing with the world. And we have to allow them to do that. We have to empower them to do that.
Yep.
Because if not, we're missing out on creativity, on genius, on
Right.
so many things by just seeing them have some other disability and saying, oh, they must not have anything of worth for us.
Exactly. So I think that's really important that we do have that. Yeah,
Yeah.
to be able to see that.
So I have a question about because so some of the people from Love on the Spectrum, I actually follow on TikTok
Mhm.
and other forms of social media. How do you feel like social media, things like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, have benefited or hurt, um, you know,
Right. Hmm.
the
I
study?
think, right. I think there's some benefits to social media. I definitely know with connecting with other people that have disabilities, I wouldn't be able to do that without social media, like sharing articles and, when I get something published. So, and it's that connection because you're able to find groups of people that they have disabilities. So I think that can be helpful. And of course, it can be difficult, I think, with people with disabilities when people aren't always kind, or they're not always nice, or there's things that people will say or they'll do, or how they're portrayed. So there's a lot of benefits with having that connection, but there's also the downside too. And I just try my best to use it in a really positive way.
Yeah, because of course there's definitely cyberbullying, and
Mhm.
like I was I see it as because I want to cheer them on, like I want
Right,
to continue to see the story. I'm completely engrossed in your life now, and like I feel like I'm your friend. So
right,
I'm
yeah.
seeing it from that point of view.
Mhm.
But there are definitely bullies and trolls.
Oh
And
yeah,
do you have
yeah.
any advice on how to, if you're encountering that, you know?
Right. Probably what I try to really do is if I notice that there's somebody that sometimes there's things that you do ignore. I mean, just sometimes I'll even get people with disabilities that may have a different opinion. And if it's something like that, I try to just, not feed into that by sometimes speaking up. And there's times you do speak up too. But if somebody is doing something like that, and I do try to, I'll report that, or I'll block a person if I feel that, hey, this isn't a really good situation that I want to get into. with somebody. That can be something I can do personally. I mean, that it's a personal decision that I'll do myself. But I think also what I just try to make sure that I'm treating other people how I want to be treated, and just trying to put the positive information out there.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I've definitely reported things. Have
Right.
you ever tried to educate? Because I always feel like I am not in a position that I know
Right.
enough to educate someone.
I have at times, but sometimes when you get into that position, that it turns out into this thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. There are times when we do try to educate, and I've had other people do constructive criticism with me, which is fine. I mean, if you're coming out there and you're telling me I have some misinformation, I'm happy to correct that and to do that, and I do appreciate that. But I think sometimes what I try to do is the education when I get things out there with articles to make sure that's my way of doing that. And sometimes people just have a different opinion. I can remember I had a piece that I got published on how I'm not lucky that I can't drive. And I had people in disability groups that say, well, of course you can drive. And I did a little bit of, just trying to say, well, I'm doing what's best for me. But sometimes it's just, you have to sometimes just ignore the person. It's just sometimes just rising above that. Because you're going to get people that are going to be critics, and there's going to be people even in the disability community that don't quite understand that. And it's that, but if it's a safety issue, or someone's making you feel unsafe, then that is definitely something that we don't take too light. I don't take lightly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also important to note, that if there is something that is, harassing or makes you feel uncomfortable or makes you feel unsafe, that should immediately be reported.
Yes.
Or told to someone of authority that can actually
Right.
help with it.
Of course. Yes.
Because a lot of times we sweep things like this under the rug, and then they do manifest into something unsafe.
Exactly. So I think, if it's unsafe, definitely report that. Definitely, take it out. Definitely not put up with that. But sometimes I just have to accept somebody's going to have another opinion, and that's okay. I may not agree with what somebody else thinks, but if it's just, sometimes I have to just give that grace and be like, all right, I can educate somebody. I can explain it through the blog. But sometimes there's just that grace you got to give somebody else.
Yeah. And so you spoke about your blog. I want to kind of tell the viewers, how do they find it? What can they expect on it?
Sure. You can find my blog. It's at michellesmission.blog. And when you look on my blog, I have disability articles that talk about life with a disability. And I also have my photography on there too. I love to take pictures of flowers and butterflies. When I'm not able to get a ride somewhere, I'm lucky to live in a central location, so I'll take pictures of butterflies and flowers, and you'll see a lot of that on there as well.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit more about your photography. Do you, is that something you do as a career? Is that something you just love to do and do it,
I do both. I've entered my art into shows as well. I also have I had a journal made through Independent and Work Ready a few years ago that had a picture of a butterfly on it. I shortlisted in a competition, and I have some stuff that journals and things like that I love to put on there as well. But it's just definitely a love for me that and sometimes with having the disability, I'm able to capture details that other people might miss. And some of that's through being able to not driving and sitting in the passenger seat or walking, I'm able to capture things that you can't do if you're driving a vehicle. And just sometimes I'm able to be observant. My husband and I were on an outing, and I was like, "Oh, do you see that flower over there?" And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Over there." He's like, "Oh, I didn't even notice that." So part of my, with having a neurodiverse brain, I'm able to sometimes get details that other people might miss.
Yeah, so it's almost like having a different perspective, right? So photography is and art is all about sharing your perspective, all about sharing your version of the world. So that's amazing that your disability allows you to and allows you to have a different perspective and see details that would be otherwise missed.
Right, exactly.
That's beautiful. Thank
you
you so much for sharing. Is there any nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to leave the audience with?
The biggest nugget of wisdom I like to tell people that are neurodiverse is, or just have any kind of disability, is not to give up and just keep on finding a different way to do something.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Because I feel like in our school system, we are so trained to think that there's only one right answer and only one way to get there. But you can get to the right answer in so many different ways. And it's really important for people to understand that and to allow themselves to get to the answer in their own way.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm so glad that you shared. Thank you, Michelle, for being on here.
Well, thank you for having me.
If anyone has any questions for Michelle, or if you're watching this now on the replay, please feel free to ask. I will be monitoring the comments, and so I'll answer anything. And if I don't know something, I'll make sure that Michelle has the ability to chime in. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can, I'll be putting the comments, sorry. If you're watching this on Facebook, I will be putting all of the links in the comment section. If you're watching this on YouTube and you know that somebody else needs to hear it, please like, subscribe, share. And Michelle, if you want to tell people how to get in touch with you, if they'd like to speak to you directly, that would be amazing.
Sure. You can find me at my blog, michellesmission.blog. You can find me on Facebook for Michelle Steiner. And you can also find me on Instagram at Steiner 7250.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. This was amazing.
Thank you.
I am so grateful.
Thank you so much.
Have an amazing night, everyone, and I will see you next week with another episode of Galit Speaks. Bye.
Bye.